I flew to see my son without telling him, and he looked me in the eye and said, "Who invited you? Just leave." By the next morning, my phone showed 7 missed calls. Before I begin, thank you for being here with me. Stay with me until the end of this story and tell me in the comments which city you're listening from. It helps me remember that somewhere out there, my words are reaching people who understand. For 32 years, I thought I knew what being a mother meant. My name is Carol. I raised my son, Daniel, in a tiny house in Ohio with creaky floors and thin walls that shook every time a truck passed by. I worked double shifts at the hospital night after night under fluorescent lights so he could go to college and never have to count pennies the way I did. I sat at every baseball game, even in the pouring rain, wrapped in a plastic poncho, screaming his name until my voice went hoarse. When he got a job in tech and moved to Seattle, I cried in my kitchen, alone, then wiped my face and told myself, "You did it. You launched him." When he married Amanda 3 years ago, I bought a new dress I couldn't afford and smiled so hard my cheeks hurt. I welcomed her in with open arms. I told everyone, "She's so pretty and smart. I'm lucky. He chose well." Then Lily came, my first granddaughter. She's 5 now, all big eyes and messy ponytails. Connor followed, my little grandson, only 18 months old, still with that baby smell that makes your heart melt. I visited twice a year, never more. I always called weeks in advance, made sure it was a good time, and brought gifts that would fit in my suitcase. Tiny dresses, board books, wooden cars. I was careful. That's what everyone says you should be as a mother-in-law, careful. I watched Amanda closely at first, like any protective mother would. She seemed pleasant, polite, always saying the right things, but there was something in her smile that never quite reached her eyes when she spoke to me. A tightness in her jaw when I laughed with Daniel. Little things. Things you could dismiss if you wanted to, and for a long time, I did. She's young, I told myself. She's tired. 2 small kids, a husband with a demanding job, a house to manage. Don't be dramatic, Carol. Don't be that mother-in-law. The last time I held my grandchildren before everything exploded was 6 months ago. 6 months. After that visit, Amanda always had a reason why now wasn't good. The kids are sick, maybe next month. The house is a mess, we're renovating. My family is visiting, the schedule's crazy. Daniel's under a lot of pressure at work. We just need some quiet time. Reason after reason, excuse after excuse, stitched together so neatly that, at first, even I believed them. I tried video calls. At the beginning, they would last half an hour. Lily would show me her drawings, spin around to show me her dresses, ask me to sing the little song I used to hum when she was a baby. Then, the calls got shorter. "Oh, Grandma, we were just heading out." "Lily's throwing a tantrum. We'll call you another time." "It's Connor's nap time. Sorry, we have to cut this short." Click. Call ended. I'd stare at my own reflection on the black screen, holding a smile that no one could see anymore. That ache in my chest, the one only mothers know, woke me up at 3 in the morning more than once. I'd lie there in the dark, listening to the old radiator hiss, and think, something is wrong. This isn't just busy. This is shutting me out. One day, after yet another not a good time message from Amanda, I sat at my kitchen table with my phone in my hand and realized I had not physically hugged my grandchildren in half a year. What kind of grandmother lets that happen? The answer I didn't want to say out loud was, a grandmother who trusts too much, and a grandmother who is being slowly pushed out. So I did something I had never done before. I booked a flight to Seattle without telling anyone. I didn't ask, "Is it okay?" I didn't send my usual polite text, thinking of visiting. "Would that work for you?" I just bought the ticket, printed the confirmation, and put it on my fridge like a secret. Was I overreacting? Maybe. But the fear of being wrong was smaller than the fear of never seeing Lily and Connor again. I arrived on a Tuesday afternoon. The sky over Seattle was that flat gray that always looks like it's thinking about raining. I took an Uber from the airport, watching the city slide by glass buildings, coffee shops on every corner, people with umbrellas walking briskly like they all had somewhere important to be. We turned into their neighborhood, the kind of suburb you see in real estate ads. Their house was a beautiful craftsman with a manicured lawn, white trim, and a swing set in the backyard. It looked like the picture of a perfect family. My heart pounded as I walked up the steps, suitcase rolling behind me. I could hear children's laughter inside. Lily's laugh, I would recognize it anywhere. For the first time in weeks, I actually smiled. I rang the doorbell. The laughter stopped. A few seconds later, I heard Daniel's voice from inside, muffled by the door. "Did you order something?" Amanda answered, but her voice was too soft for me to make out the words. The lock clicked. The door opened. Daniel stood there in a t-shirt and jeans, barefoot, his hair a little messy. For a split second, I saw my boy, the same boy who used to come home from school with grass stains and ask, "Mom, what's for dinner?" But his face wasn't surprised. It was angry. "Mom, what are you doing here?" I forced a light tone into my voice, like this was all a fun little surprise. "I came to visit. I wanted to surprise you and the kids. I've missed you all so much." "Who invited you?" The way he said it flat, cold cut deeper than if he'd shouted. It didn't sound like my son. It sounded like a stranger practicing a line. Behind him, I saw Lily peeking around the corner. "Grandma?" she whispered, her eyes lighting up. Amanda appeared instantly, pulling Lily back by the shoulder, her expression smooth and unreadable. "Daniel," I said softly, "I don't need an invitation to see my own grandchildren. You can't just show up like this," he snapped. "You should have called. This is not a good time. When is a good time?" The words slipped out sharper than I meant. "I've been trying to visit for months. We've been busy," he said. But it wasn't really his voice I was hearing anymore. It was Amanda's talking through him. From behind his shoulder, I heard her, sweet and controlled. "Daniel, tell her we'll call her when things settle down." He stepped forward, forcing me to step back onto the porch. "Mom, go home. We'll talk later." "I flew all the way here," I whispered. My hand tightened around the handle of my suitcase. I could still hear my own heartbeat in my ears. "I didn't ask you to do that," he said. "Go back to Ohio." Then the words that would replay in my head like a broken record for days. "Who invited you?" "Just leave." He didn't slam the door. He closed it calmly, quietly, as if he were finishing a task. No drama, no shouting, no second thoughts. And somehow, that hurt even more. I stood there on that picture-perfect porch, under a sky that had finally decided to drizzle, with birds chirping in the trees like it was any other day. My suitcase sat by my feet. My son was on the other side of the door. My granddaughter's voice echoed in my mind. "Grandma?" For the first time in my life, I understood what it meant to be truly, completely alone. I didn't knock again. I didn't scream. I didn't beg. The tears didn't even come yet. There was just this huge, hollow space in my chest where my heart was supposed to be. I picked up my suitcase, walked down the steps, and pulled out my phone. But I didn't open the airline app to change my ticket. I ordered another Uber. I didn't go back to the airport. Not yet. I checked into a Holiday Inn near the freeway, the kind of generic hotel where every hallway smells the same and every painting looks like it was chosen in a hurry. I swiped my key card, heard the soft click, and stepped into a room that could have been anywhere in the world. I sat on the edge of the bed, my knees still shaking, staring at my phone on the nightstand. Something was wrong. Not just, "we're busy" wrong. Not just, miscommunication wrong. Very, very wrong. I fell asleep at some point, still in my clothes, the TV flickering in the background, my suitcase half unzipped on the floor. The next morning, the light coming through the thin curtains was harsh and unforgiving. I reached for my phone, more out of habit than intention. 72 missed calls, all from Daniel. My screen lit up again before I even finished counting. Call number 73. I just stared at the display as it buzzed in my hand. Yesterday, I was an uninvited burden. Today, I was suddenly an emergency. And in that moment, something inside me shifted. Their panic didn't feel like love. It felt like fear. Not fear for me. Fear of what I might do now that I was no longer where they could see me. I stared at my phone as it buzzed in my hand, the screen lighting up with Daniel's name again and again, as if repetition could erase what had happened on that porch. 72 missed calls. It didn't make sense. Yesterday, they couldn't wait to push me out the door. Today, they acted like my disappearance was a crisis. But the strangest part was the tone of the voicemails, not loving, not apologetic, panicked, demanding. "Mom, where are you? Call me back immediately. This isn't funny. You need to tell us where you're staying. Mom, we're sorry, okay? Please just answer." And then Amanda's voice, sweet like syrup but cold underneath. "Carol, honey, we're worried sick. Call us." Worried sick? From two people who had looked me in the eye and shut the door on me less than 24 hours earlier. Not one message asked if I was safe. Not one asked if I needed help. Every voicemail was about them, their worry, their stress, their urgency. Something was very wrong. I sat on the edge of the hotel bed, hands shaking slightly, the thin morning light cutting across the room like a spotlight. I wasn't sure what scared me more, their sudden desperation, or the possibility that I finally understood it. They weren't afraid for me. They were afraid of what I might do, now that I was no longer under their control. I opened my laptop. If modern mothers had instincts, modern grandmothers had Google. I typed, grandparent denied access to grandchildren. Then, daughter-in-law controlling contact. Then, parental alienation signs. Within minutes, I fell into a world I didn't know existed, forums filled with people just like me. Stories that echoed my own like a cruel chorus. Grandparents who went from visiting weekly to unwelcome strangers, mothers pushed aside when a new spouse tightened their grip, sons who slowly drifted away until they were completely gone. One term kept appearing: grandparent alienation. A slow, deliberate cutting of ties, a shift from warmth to distance, 1,000 tiny excuses that eventually built an impenetrable wall. Every post felt like someone had been watching my life and writing it down. I wasn't imagining things. I wasn't being dramatic or needy. What I was experiencing had a name, and people didn't survive it by staying quiet. I pulled out a notebook from my suitcase, the old-fashioned kind with a spiral spine, and began writing. Not typing, writing. Ink felt safer, something that couldn't be accessed or accidentally deleted. Dates, times, missed visits, canceled calls, texts from Amanda that suddenly looked very different when read in hindsight. January 2023, weekly video calls. June 2023, bi-weekly, often canceled. November 2023, monthly, always cut short. March 2024, last full video call. Amanda cuts Lily off mid-sentence. April, October 2024, a wall of excuses. I treated those excuses as random events, normal, busy family life, but lined up in order. They formed a pattern as straight as a knife. My phone buzzed again. Another message from Daniel. Mom, you're scaring us. Please just answer. Scaring them? By existing somewhere they couldn't see me? No, I whispered to myself. Not this time. For the first time in years, I blocked my own son's number. The silence that followed was deafening and strangely liberating. Like I'd just taken back a piece of myself I didn't realize I'd been giving away. For 2 days, I barely left the hotel room. I ordered takeout, sat with my notebook, scrolled through every message I'd exchanged with Daniel and Amanda in the last 2 years, screenshotting everything, every excuse, every shift in tone, every moment where Daniel sounded less like Daniel. Then I found something else. A law firm in Seattle specializing in grandparent rights, Morrison and Associates. Their website was clean, professional, and filled with articles that made my chest tighten with recognition. Sudden cutoff without explanation. Emotional manipulation of the adult child. Use of children as leverage. Every sentence described my life. I read for hours, the way you read medical symptoms when you already know the diagnosis, but need someone else to say it out loud. When I finally picked up the phone and called them, my voice shook only on the first 3 words. I need help. The receptionist's tone softened immediately. Of course. Can I get your name? Carol Henderson, I said. And this is urgent. They scheduled me for the next morning. The office was on the 14th floor of a glass building downtown. I wore the same blazer I'd bought for Daniel's wedding, the one that once symbolized pride and now felt like armor. Jennifer Morrison greeted me personally. She was in her 50s, confident but warm, with that steady presence that made you feel safe enough to fall apart without actually doing it. Tell me everything, she said, and I did. The closed door, the 72 calls, the slow erasure over the last 2 years. Jennifer never interrupted. She just nodded occasionally, as if each detail fit neatly into a puzzle she'd seen many times before. When I finished, she sat back, tapping her pen lightly. Mrs. Henderson, I'm going to be honest with you. Grandparent visitation cases are hard. The bar is high. But what you've described. She opened a folder and slid it toward me. This isn't normal boundary setting. This is a control pattern. And ironically, their panic when you became unavailable? That could play in your favor. For once, I murmured, almost laughing at the absurdity. To move forward, she continued, we'll need documentation, witnesses, proof of your previous relationship with the children. Are you prepared for that? Prepared? No. Determined? Absolutely. Yes, I said. Tell me what to do. And just like that, I went from mother to investigator. I created a new email address, one Daniel and Amanda wouldn't recognize. I reached out to people who still knew the old Daniel. His college roommate, Mike, responded within an hour. Honestly, he's changed since marrying Amanda. Stopped hanging out with us. She doesn't like his old friends. Why? Why? Such a simple word for such a complicated answer. Another piece of the puzzle clicked into place. That night, standing in front of the hotel mirror, I barely recognized myself. My gray hair, my tired eyes. But there was something new there too, a steel I hadn't felt since the days I left Daniel's father and built a life from scratch. I'm not going to let her erase me, I whispered to my reflection. Not from my life, not from my son's life, and certainly not from my grandchildren's. Tomorrow, I would start fighting. The formal letter requesting visitation was sent on a Thursday afternoon. Jennifer explained the process, step by step, calm, methodical, almost gentle, but my heart still hammered as she handed me a copy of the certified notice. This is reasonable, she said. No accusations, no threats, just a request. If they refuse, we escalate. Refuse. I already knew they would. For 2 days, my email stayed quiet. My phone stayed blocked. The silence felt intentional, like the long inhale before someone screams. Then, on Saturday morning, my new inbox lit up with a message from an unfamiliar address. Subject line, we need to talk. It was from Daniel, except not from his usual email. Amanda hadn't sent it, but it didn't feel like Daniel either. It felt coached. Mom, I don't know what game you're playing, but you need to stop. Amanda is devastated. You're tearing our family apart. If you want to see the kids, all you have to do is apologize. This legal threat is insane. Are you having some kind of breakdown? Every sentence was a weapon wrapped in concern. That's what manipulation looks like. Not rage, not violence, just subtle reframing until the truth bends. I forwarded it to Jennifer. Her reply came within minutes. Perfect. Save everything. Perfect. The word felt strange, but I understood. They were exposing themselves without realizing it. That evening, I allowed myself to cry for the first time since this nightmare began, not because of the email, not because of the door closing in my face, but because of the clarity settling in my chest like a heavy stone. My son wasn't choosing Amanda over me. He wasn't choosing anyone. He wasn't even choosing himself. He was repeating what someone else taught him to say. My phone vibrated in my hand, a call from a blocked number. Against my better judgment, I answered. Carol, Amanda's voice. No sweetness this time. No fake warmth. You and I need to have a conversation. Woman to woman. I have nothing to say to you, I replied. You're making a mistake. Her tone sharpened into something icy. Daniel doesn't want you in our lives. He told me you were always overbearing, always critical. He's relieved you're finally out of the picture. I let her words sit in the air for a moment, tasting the lie inside them. If Daniel truly felt that way, I said softly, why is it you speaking for him again? Silence. A crack. Then Amanda hissed. I'm willing to let you see the kids occasionally, on our terms. If you drop this ridiculous legal action. There it was. The illusion of power. The bait. No, I didn't raise my voice. I didn't justify myself. I simply said no. You bitter old woman, Amanda snapped, the mask fully gone now. Daniel thinks you're unstable. You're embarrassing yourself. And yet, I replied, it's you calling me, not him. She hung up hard. I immediately called Jennifer's emergency line. She just showed her hand, Jennifer said after hearing the entire conversation. This is intimidation. It helps us. For the first time in days, I exhaled. The next morning, a knock at my hotel door. No worse. A soft sound of paper sliding against carpet. I opened the door carefully. A letter. Handwritten. Expensive stationery. Amanda again. I unfolded it slowly. Carol, I know you think I've turned Daniel against you, but that isn't true. You pushed him away. Your behavior has been harmful, but I'm willing to offer you a compromise. Drop the lawsuit, and we will allow supervised visits once every 2 months, 2 hours, at our home. supervised by her. Then came the threat, wrapped in cursive loops. If you continue with this legal action, we will be forced to reveal certain things about your past that could damage your case. Things Daniel told me in confidence. Your mental state. Your drinking. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because the desperation was so naked. I took photos from every angle and sent them to Jennifer. Her reply, she's panicking. Good. Keep the letter. But the worst part hadn't come yet. That evening, my phone buzzed again, messages from numbers I didn't recognize. A photo of me entering the hotel. A photo of me at a coffee shop. A photo of me crossing the street. Then the message, we know where you are. My chest tightened. Not fear, rage. I called hotel security, then the police. A board officer stood in my doorway scribbling notes. Ma'am, you're in public spaces. Anyone can take photos. Unless there's a direct threat, we can't. I am being threatened, I said, shaking. With what? A camera? He replied. He left with a shrug. But his indifference did something unexpected. It pushed me past fear and straight into resolve. They wanted to scare me into disappearing. They wanted to intimidate me into silence. Instead, they made the biggest mistake possible. They made me angry. The next morning, Jennifer called. Carol, you need to take a few days and breathe. Go somewhere they can't follow. A friend, a relative, anywhere. Then come back with a clear mind. I thought of my old friend Margaret in Portland, the one constant in my life outside Daniel and the kids. Yes, I said. I can do that. Good, Jennifer replied. Because now they know you're serious, and they're about to escalate. I packed my bag before the sun came up, checked out quietly, and left Seattle without telling anyone except Jennifer. For 3 days, I stayed with Margaret, eating her homemade soup, sitting on her porch, breathing air that didn't taste like fear. For the first time since arriving in Seattle, my heartbeat slowed. For the first time, I remembered I was more than someone's mother, someone's grandmother, someone's target. I was a person, a woman, someone who had survived worse and kept going. When I returned to Seattle at the end of those 3 days, I checked into a different hotel under Margaret's name. Let them try to find me now. By the time I sat on that unfamiliar bed, my phone vibrated with a message that made my stomach drop. An email from Daniel. His real account. Mom, I've had time to think. I was too harsh. Can we meet? Just you and me? No Amanda. No lawyers. Coffee. Like old times. A coffee shop from his childhood. A place he loved. A place we used to sit together and dream. If I hadn't known better, my heart would have leapt. But now I knew better. This wasn't a peace offering. This wasn't nostalgia. This was a setup. And still, I had to go. For him, for the truth, for the war they didn't realize I was finally prepared to fight. I arrived 10 minutes early. The coffee shop looked exactly the same as it had years ago. Same scratched wooden tables, same mismatched mugs hanging above the counter, same sweet smell of cinnamon and burnt espresso drifting through the air. For a moment, just a moment, I let myself remember the boy Daniel used to be. The boy who used to sit across from me, eating warm apple turnovers and asking nervous questions about college. But nostalgia is dangerous. It softens your defenses. And today, I couldn't afford soft. At 10:02, Daniel walked in. He looked thinner, older somehow, like stress had carved new lines into his face. For a second, I thought I saw the real him flicker through the one who used to hug me first before saying a word. But it vanished just as quickly. Hi, Mom. We ordered coffee. Neither of us ordered turnovers this time. Daniel sat across from me, both hands wrapped around his cup like he needed something to hold on to. For nearly a full minute, he didn't speak. The noise of the espresso machine felt strangely loud between us. I miss you, he finally said. My chest tightened. Then why did you close the door in my face? He flinched. Mom, I was stressed. Amanda's mother was coming. Work's been crazy. You showed up unexpectedly. I just snapped. I shouldn't have. I'm sorry. It sounded rehearsed. Not entirely fake, just polished, practiced. Daniel, I asked softly, why haven't I been able to visit for 6 months? We've been busy. You've had 2 children for 5 years, I said. You weren't this busy before. He didn't respond. So I asked the question that mattered. What, exactly, does Amanda say I did wrong? He hesitated just long enough to confirm the truth. She said you criticized her parenting. made her feel judged. You told her she was feeding Connor wrong, that you didn't agree with our discipline methods. When? I interrupted. Give me one specific example. He blinked. Well, I don't remember the exact. You don't remember because it didn't happen. Mom, don't. No, Daniel. If you are going to believe I hurt your wife, you need to remember what I supposedly did. You need to remember the words I used, the moment it happened. Otherwise, you're not remembering. You're repeating. His jaw tightened. It landed. We sat in silence. His eyes darted toward the door like he wanted to leave but couldn't. Then, his entire demeanor shifted, as if he remembered why he was here. Mom, I came to offer something. A path forward. He cleared his throat. Amanda and I talked. If you drop the lawsuit, we'll arrange regular visits, maybe once every other month. Supervised. Just until things feel normal again. There it was, the bait. And who supervises? I asked, though I already knew. Amanda, he said. Of course. So I would get to see my grandchildren through a filter, her filter, under her rules. On her terms, every visit twisted into evidence against me. I leaned back. That's not a relationship, Daniel. That's permission. And permission can be revoked. You're being paranoid, he snapped. And you're not being honest. He slammed his cup down, coffee sloshing over the rim. Why can't you just apologize and move on? Why does everything have to be a fight with you? Apologize for what? I asked again, quietly. For things I didn't do? For a narrative someone else created? His lips parted as if he were about to speak, but then something shifted in his eyes. A flicker of fear, not of me, of something or someone behind him. I followed his gaze, and that's when I saw her, Amanda, standing just inside the door, scanning the room with laser precision. Her expression was soft when she spotted us, sweet, apologetic, but her eyes were cold. She crossed the shop quickly. Daniel, honey, she said, placing a hand on his shoulder. You forgot your phone at home. I thought you might need it. She turned to me with a smile that didn't touch her eyes. Carol, what a surprise to see you here. She wasn't surprised. She'd been waiting, probably parked outside, watching. Daniel straightened in his chair like a child caught breaking a rule. We were just talking about dropping the lawsuit, he said quickly. Oh? Amanda slid into the chair beside him without asking. That's wonderful news, Carol. Truly. I think it's very mature of you. I didn't say a word. Amanda folded her hands neatly on the table, her performance beginning. All this legal drama, it's just not good for the kids, she continued. Lily's been having nightmares. She senses the tension. You wouldn't want to cause her more stress, would you? Nightmares. Because of me? Lily wasn't scared of me, she was scared of losing me. But this woman could twist anything. If you really loved them, Amanda added, you'd let this go. And if you really loved them, I said calmly, you'd let them have a grandmother. Amanda's smile dropped, her voice lowered, the mask slipping entirely. You arrogant, bitter woman. You had your chance to be a mother. You don't get to hijack mine. Daniel is my husband. These are my children. You are a visitor at best. And right now, you're not even that. Daniel looked mortified, but he didn't stop her. He never stopped her. We're leaving, Amanda said, grabbing his arm. You have until Wednesday to drop the suit. After that, it's war. She pulled Daniel to his feet. He let himself be pulled. As they walked out, the bell above the door chimed cheerfully, a cruel contrast to the fire burning in my chest. I sat alone with 2 cooling cups of coffee, and for the first time since this began, my hands didn't shake. War? She thought this was war? She hadn't seen anything yet. The courthouse smelled like old wood and nerves. Family court always does. Lives are rearranged there, quietly and clinically, while everyone pretends it's normal. I arrived with Jennifer at 8:45 a.m. on a Thursday morning in late November. I wore a navy dress and the pearl necklace Daniel gave me for my 60th birthday before Amanda, before the distance, before the door slammed on our relationship. Wearing it felt like holding a piece of him close, even if he wouldn't look at me anymore. Daniel and Amanda sat across the aisle with their attorney, Miss Chen, a sharp woman in a perfectly tailored suit. Amanda wore soft pink, minimal makeup, her hair tucked neatly behind her ears, innocence as costume. Daniel didn't glance in my direction once. Then, Judge Patricia Reeves entered. She was in her 60s, steel gray hair pinned back, her expression one of weary competence. The kind of woman who'd seen every lie a family could tell and no longer had patience for theatrics. This is a petition for grandparent visitation rights, she began. Mrs. Henderson alleges she has been denied access to her grandchildren without reasonable cause. Mr. and Mrs. Henderson oppose this petition. Her gaze swept over both sides. Sharp, searching. Let's begin. Jennifer rose first. Your Honor, we intend to demonstrate that my client had a substantial and loving relationship with her grandchildren for years, and that this relationship was systematically severed without explanation. We have 12 witnesses ready to testify to her bond with the children and the sudden, unwarranted cutoff. Miss Chen stood next, her voice dripping with fabricated concern. Your Honor, the respondents will show that Mrs. Henderson repeatedly violated boundaries, created tension in the home, and made the mother feel inadequate. The parents have the right to limit contact with anyone, grandparent or not, who disrupts their family. Their strategy was clear. Paint me as unstable, overbearing, a threat to their peace. Fine, let them try. The first witness was Patricia from the support group. She told the court about seeing me with Lily at the park 3 years ago. How patient I was teaching her to swing. How natural our bond looked. Miss Chen pounced. So, Miss Morrison, you met my client once, briefly, at a park. That hardly qualifies you to assess her current relationship with the children, does it? Patricia didn't blink. I know love when I see it, she said. And I saw it. Small victories matter. Next came Mike Daniel's old college friend. He testified about the Daniel he once knew. Outgoing, connected, warm. Then he described the isolation that followed his marriage. Amanda doesn't like him having friends she doesn't approve of, he said plainly. He cut off everyone from before her. He stopped coming to gatherings. She even declined his invitation to my wedding, without telling him. Miss Chen objected, claiming speculation. The judge sustained. But the damage was done. A seed planted. Then it was my turn. Jennifer led me through everything. The births of Lily and Connor, the visits I'd made, the gradual erosion of contact, the day the door closed, the 72 calls, the sudden panic once I became independent. Did you ever criticize Amanda's parenting? Jennifer asked. No, I said. I offered help only when asked. Never undermined her. Did you ever show up unannounced before the incident in question? Not once. Miss Chen approached for cross-examination. Mrs. Henderson, you admit you arrived uninvited and unannounced, correct? Yes. And your son told you to leave? Yes. But instead of respecting his wishes, you stayed in Seattle, hired an attorney, and initiated legal action against your own family. Do you see how that might seem intrusive? I stayed because something was wrong, I answered. A mother knows. Miss Chen's eyes glinted. Or a controlling woman can't accept she's no longer the center of her son's life. Objection, Jennifer said sharply. Argumentative. Judge Reeves nodded. Sustained. But Miss Chen wasn't done. Mrs. Henderson, have you ever been treated for anxiety or depression? My stomach dropped. I saw a therapist after my divorce. 30 years ago. A simple yes or no. Yes. And you drink alcohol, correct? Socially, I answered. Like millions of people. How many glasses a week? Objection, Jennifer said again. Relevance? It goes to stability, Miss Chen insisted. The judge hesitated, then nodded. Allowed, but keep it narrow. I sat up straighter. I have 1 or 2 glasses of wine a week, I said. Never more. Miss Chen gave a satisfied nod, as though she'd planted evidence of a non-existent problem. Then Amanda took the stand, and I watched her transform. Her voice trembled at all the right moments. Her eyes glistened on cue. She described me as overwhelming, judgmental, critical. She said I had a tone that undermined her mothering. Jennifer stepped forward for cross. Mrs. Henderson, she asked calmly, can you provide specific examples of Carol criticizing you? Amanda blinked. Well, she had a tone. A tone, Jennifer repeated. Tones aren't statements. Can you recall words, phrases, even a date? I don't remember exactly. You remember she hurt you, but not how. Amanda stiffened. She knows what she did. Jennifer moved in. You called Carol 72 times the night she didn't answer. If you believed she was unstable or harmful, why didn't you call the police? Amanda froze. Well, we thought she'd come back. Thought she'd come back, Jennifer repeated. Or needed her back because you lost control? Objection, Miss Chen shouted. Speculation. Overruled, Judge Reeves said quietly. Answer the question. Amanda's jaw tightened. Her voice changed lower, sharper, stripped of sugar. Daniel doesn't need anyone else, she snapped. I'm enough for him. His mother controlled him his whole life. I freed him. The courtroom went dead silent. Even Miss Chen's eyes widened. Judge Reeves slowly removed her glasses and folded them on the bench. Mrs. Amanda Henderson, she said softly. Your statement reveals more than you intended. Amanda swallowed. The judge continued. Isolating a spouse from their family is not healthy boundaries. It is emotional control. She turned to Daniel. Mr. Henderson, throughout these proceedings, you've barely looked at your mother. You check your wife's face before answering a question. Even now, you seem unsure whether you're allowed to speak freely. Daniel's face crumpled slightly. The first crack. Jennifer stood. Your Honor, we are requesting only supervised visitation. Nothing more. Nothing extreme. Just the chance for Carol to be a grandmother. Judge Reeves nodded. Then she delivered her ruling. Mrs. Carol Henderson is granted visitation rights with her grandchildren, effective immediately. Twice per month. 6 hours each visit. A neutral, court-appointed supervisor will attend for the first 3 months. Miss Chen practically shot out of her seat. Your Honor. Objection is noted, the judge said, and overruled. Then she looked at Amanda and Daniel. You two will comply. Any interference will result in sanctions. These children deserve a grandmother. Her gavel struck the bench. Court adjourned. Amanda grabbed her purse and stormed out. Miss Chen hurried after her. Daniel rose slowly, like someone waking from a dream he wasn't sure he wanted. As he passed me, he paused. Mom, he whispered. Just one word. But it was the first true thing he'd said to me in months. Jennifer touched my shoulder. You won? But as I watched Daniel disappear through the doors, I felt a heaviness in my chest. I won the battle, I murmured. The war isn't over. The first supervised visit was scheduled for the following Saturday at a community center in North Seattle. It was a bright place, colorful walls, tiny chairs, shelves full of toys worn down by hundreds of little hands. A safe space. Neutral. No Amanda. Rosa, the court-appointed supervisor, smiled kindly at me as she clipped a badge to her shirt. Take your time, she said. They might be shy at first. Shy. The word was polite, but I knew what she meant. Children who've been told stories about the people who love them aren't shy, they're confused, torn, afraid to choose the wrong side. At exactly 10 mi, Daniel's car pulled up. Amanda stayed in the driver's seat, her eyes fixed forward, hands clenched around the steering wheel like she might snap it in two. She didn't even glance in my direction. Daniel got out, unbuckled the kids. Lily stepped out first, holding Connor's tiny hand. She looked around carefully as if waiting to see whether joy was allowed. Then she saw me. Grandma? Her whole face lit up, then dimmed just as quickly as she flicked her eyes toward the car, checking for permission that never came. I knelt down, opening my arms. Hi, sweetheart. I've missed you so much. Mommy said you were sick? She whispered. Sick. Of course, I'm all better now, I said gently. And I brought something. I pulled out a children's book, the one we used to read together. The one about grandmothers who bake pies and tell stories and chase away nightmares. Lily gasped. Our book. For 6 hours we played. Swings. Block towers. Drawing with crayons. Connor climbed into my lap, warm and heavy, and rested his head on my shoulder like he'd been waiting to come home. Every now and then, Rosa watched discreetly, making notes. Neutral. Objective. But I caught her smiling a few times. When Daniel came to pick them up, Lily ran toward him, waving the book in the air. Daddy, Grandma's not sick anymore. Daniel looked at me then, really looked at me for the first time in nearly a year. His eyes softened. He mouthed, Thank you. It was small, but it was a start. Over the next few months, I did everything right. Every rule, every guideline, every boundary Jennifer warned me to respect. Rosa's reports were glowing, appropriate, loving, respectful. No signs of undermining. Strong bond. After 3 months, supervision ended. After 6 months, the court granted me overnight visits. So I moved to Seattle permanently. I found a small 2-bedroom apartment near Green Lake. I decorated Lily's room with butterfly wallpaper and stocked Connor's room with soft blue blankets and trucks. I bought matching pajamas for their first overnight stay. They ran from room to room laughing, touching everything, exploring the space like it was a kingdom created just for them. Because it was. Grandma's house, a home with soft rules and unconditional love. Meanwhile, something else was happening slowly, quietly. Daniel started staying a little longer after pickups. First 5 minutes, then 10, then coffee, then dinner. One evening, sitting at my kitchen table, he finally said it. I didn't see it. He swallowed. She said she was protecting me from your toxicity. She twisted everything. I believed her because it was easier than questioning my entire marriage. His hands trembled slightly. Amanda didn't want me talking to anyone who knew me before her. Friends, old neighbors, you. He looked up. I'm sorry, Mom. Hearing that word, Mom landed differently this time. This time, it sounded like a truth finally freed from someone else's script. A month later, he moved into a small rental house nearby. 4 months after that, he filed for divorce. Amanda fought viciously allegations, manipulative emails, emotional theatrics, but the court had seen her pattern. Therapists documented the isolation, the emotional manipulation, the control. Daniel got primary custody. Amanda got supervised visitation. The irony wasn't lost on anyone, not even the judge. She had tried to cage me, and in the end, she built a cage for herself. My life rebuilt itself in small, beautiful ways. Weekly visits, picnics at the park, reading bedtime stories on the couch, tiny arms wrapped around my waist, little voices calling, Grandma, watch. Lily drew pictures of our apartment with butterflies exploding out of the windows. Connor's first full sentence was, Gamma, I love you. Daniel started playing guitar again. He reconnected with friends. He joined a basketball league. He laughed more. He breathed more. And slowly, he became himself again. On Lily's 6th birthday, we had a small party at my apartment. Balloons, cupcakes, homemade decorations. Daniel was there. The kids were there. Mike from college came. Margaret drove up from Portland. Even Patricia from my support group brought a little gift bag. Small, chaotic, perfect. Watching Lily blow out her candles, Daniel standing behind her with a hand on her shoulder, Connor climbing into my lap, frosting on his cheeks, I realized something. I hadn't just won access to my grandchildren. I had won back my son, piece by piece, moment by moment, year by year. We rebuilt what Amanda nearly destroyed. Amanda eventually moved across the country. She sends the occasional email, long paragraphs blaming everyone but herself. I don't respond. I don't hate her. I don't wish her ill. I wish her clarity, self-awareness, peace. But that's not my battle. My battle is over, and I won. Here's what I learned. Love doesn't quit, even when doors close, even when your own child turns against you, even when everyone says you're fighting a losing war. Manipulation thrives in silence. Isolation is an abuser's strongest weapon. And grandparents? We have rights. We have voices. And we do not disappear. Not quietly. Not easily. Not ever. What would you have done in my place? Would you have walked away or kept fighting? Tell me in the comments. And remember, family isn't about power. It's about who stays, who fights, who loves without conditions. Thank you for listening. Never give up on the people you love. Never.